Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be doing a weekly metagame breakdown for the historic best of 3 format. This upcoming weekend will be the qualifier, both the play-in for historic best of 3 and the actual qualifier event. We put out a bunch of lists for folks for the best of 1, including my top pick, the Woodlands deck that multiple people commented that they got the 6-0 with, so it's awesome to hear. It's always fun to make the meta call. Unfortunately, I did not get to participate in the event. I've been sick for the last couple days and it hasn't been fun, just life getting in the way. But we're going to be I'm going to be doing one now just to give people a heads up leading up to the week, because I know people like to practice. And then a couple days before the event, I will post another one of these just as the week kind of shapes up. I know a lot of people are kind of testing out. It's still pretty early into best of 3 for historic, so for the data, it's not going to be super deep. I had to do a lot of digging on this. So there's lists that I think I promise here. Boros Energy, like you can see on the screen, is about 51% of the meta from Platinum to Mythic for the last day, which is kind of wild. So we're going into a format where there's a clear cut, like 61% in Diamond. So it is a deck that we know 71% in Mythic. So Boros is omnipresent. So when we're looking at when we're factoring that in, you want to consider how you're building your deck. Now, Boros has got a few different angles. You have Boros Phlage, you have Boros Lurrus, you have the Mardu variants. There's the energy package and a lot of ways to kind of build around that. So things like Sun Cleanser main, Bombardment is a very strong card for the mirrors, stuff like that. So there's a couple different versions we'll look at today. Having said that, I do think there's ways to attack it. In best of 1, quick combo decks were very effective during the metagame challenge. There's going to be 2 lists that I think you may see in the event. The problem is they are both graveyard-centric decks that do get housed by graveyard hate, but there's kind of a light touch in terms of graveyard hate right now. People are playing Phlage, so there's not Rest in Peace. Usually like Hearse, sometimes Surgical Extraction, which can hurt it, but they're kind of turn 2, turn 3, turn 4 combo decks that can get under Boros, at least in best of 1. Where it stands in best of 3, that's something that I'm going to be exploring as well with one of the lists to see if I can kind of get it to work in best of 3. So like I said, usually we go through the popularity of the dates. It's basically Boros and then ways to beat Boros. Mono Green Devotion, Abzan Yawgmoth, stuff like that. I think going into the weekend, if I had to make a pick right now, I would say potentially, so energy is always going to be strong, but people are going to bring a lot of hate for it. I think if you're familiar with Abzan Yawgmoth, that's probably a good call, has a good matchup against the energy decks. I think that some version of Jeskai control could be relevant in it. Potentially the Primal Prayers decks, depending on how you build. And we'll cover off a couple of these options. Mono green is strong into a lot of the other decks, but I find it, at least being on the Boros side, it was pretty easy matchup, all things considered. But let's jump into the games themselves. One thing I do want to preface today, don't focus so much on the win rate percentages. It's a small sample size. I'm just more kind of showing deck lists that are reasonable and kind of nitpicking at some of the choices in terms of how you may want to combat it. I played a lot of Boros Energy kind of leading up, so I have some familiarity with that. So like I said, the last week there's only been 3,700 games, which is fairly small, kind of going from there. But we're going to jump in. So the first energy deck is a Boros Phlage with Giganta Companion. So with this list here, we look at it. What you get in this version is Phlage, Titan of Fire's Fury, very good in the mirror, helps against the grindier matchups as well. So it's kind of recursive value. Playing that with Fable, that helps smooth out your draws. The one card I'm not sold on in these lists is Felia. Felia, want to come up? The dog? Where's Felia? There we go. Okay, well, keeps coming up as Lightning Helix. Felia is the one. It's a flash 2/2. And then when you attack, you can blink something. I think attacking in, it's pretty low power. You could blink your opponent's stuff, but then they kind of get value. There's some utility when you're ahead to reblink your Johnnies or Fables, like things with the ETB, or reset your unstable amulet. I think it's pretty weak on its own. when you're not kind of ahead on board. Static Prison's in here, Galvanic Discharge, Guide of Souls, Oscillate Pride kind of mixed in. This version as well has no Goblin Bombardment, which I think in the mirror is kind of wrong. You get so much value off Bombardment, just being able to trigger a Johnny whenever. With the trigger of Phlage on the stack, you can sack it to deal 1 additional damage. There's a lot of redundancy that it brings forth. With these Giganta versions, you'll usually see some number of Aether Hubs in the mana base because it allows you to Raptor into a 3-drop on turn 2. This version's also got a higher density Prismatic Vistas to kind of act like fetch lands that you see in like Modern to make basically have more fodder to get rid of for Phlage. And the festivities for the mirror gets rid of all the 1-drops. Fragment is removal, Cathar Commando, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Containment Priest, anything that's being cheated into play. Notably, this does hit your own Raptor hits, so be mindful of that. Sun Cleanser for the mirror. Stonebrain is a card I don't like. You are, at the end of the day, an aggressive deck. This takes basically 2 turns to get off, or 4 mana. Just play Surgical Extraction. It does kind of the same thing, I think. And then it's just incidental Graveyard Hate as well. I don't like these Stonebrain effects. Like, if you're a bigger mana deck, control deck, but I don't think. A deck that I think is a little bit more refined. So this is from Nyktok's Portuguese streamer. They've been hovering around top 50 to like 25 to 50 Mythic. Currently at 35. So they're 51 and 16 with this list. And by the way, I'll paste all these deck lists, so don't worry. So this version here is just a little bit cleaner. We have the Goblin Bombardments. Full set of Lightning Helix, and then the mana base, we see the full Sunbaked Canyon for value. Arena Glory plays very nicely with Phlage as a way to give it haste the turn it comes in. Sideboards, Fragments, you have Pithing Needles for activated abilities, One Ring, stuff like that. Containment Priest, as mentioned. Invasion for the control decks, stuff like that, of course. Sun Cleanser, Hearse, and then Brotherhood's End is his choice for kind of the mirror and kind of the go wide decks. And if you incidentally run into artifact decks, but most of the artifact decks have been pushed out of the format. So the other deck is Boros Energy, but this is the Lurrus version. So in this one here, you have Guide of Souls, Esper Sentinel, Static Prisons, the same. Again, I'm not a huge fan of Phelia, but you have your Goblin Bombardments in here as well. 22 lands. I've dabbled with 20 to 21. I've been okay with it. I do not like the Aether Hub in this version. I find it to be ineffective because you always have your Raptor hits. You have a very like bunch of solid pips, double pips. You don't want to have a land that's required to generate colored mana just to be able to play it out. So I haven't been a huge fan of the Aether Hubs in the Lurrus version. The sideboard's a little bit dated. I wouldn't play Meltdowns. Shove Aside's fine, but you could also just play Fragment Reality. It's got a broader spread. You probably want at least 3 Invasions and 2 Sun Cleansers. So for comparison, let's pull up my list. I'll be transparent. I haven't played this in a couple days because I was focusing on best of 1. So I was 9-0 with this version here. So I was going more the Soul Sister package. This one might be a little bit dated, but I played Esper Sentinel instead. So I got rid of the Leonin Vanguards. I trimmed those down. And I went to 2 Static Prisons, and I played the full set of Esper Sentinels. 2 Bombardments, full set of Amulet. So that's kind of like my configuration of the list. This is my mana base. Again, the Meltdowns I took out. I was playing the full... So I got rid of the Return to the Ranks. I was trying this out. And the Meltdowns. And I played a full set of the Invasions of Gobuken. But this is just kind of a different idea of the deck. So the thing is with Boros, there's a lot of different ways to build the deck. Is kind of what I'm at. There's your core cards. It's how you want to hate on the deck. The one thing I will say is post-board, especially in the mirror against white-based decks, there's a lot more Sun Cleansers coming in. So you might want to be mindful with how you sideboard to sideboard out some unstable amulets or Amped Raptor, the cards that are less effective when you can't generate energy. You then go to Abzan Yawg. So this one's 64%, but it's a Convoke deck at its core. You have Avacyn's Pilgrim, Gilded Goose as ways to kind of get ahead on mana. Kind of the core of the deck. Yawgmoth with Young Wolves, you sacrifice, so you can kind of mow down your opponent. You have ways with Hapatra to kind of get value. You have Ropeline Attendant, which is a really strong turn 2 play. If you put it on the Young Wolf, every time the Young Wolf comes back into play, it generates a creature. So it's another way to have kind of the infinite loop of being able to sacrifice. You play it in addition with something that gains a life when it comes into play, the Prosperous Innkeeper, Guide of Souls type effects, and he gets a lot of utility. Another card that's being seen some play is the Makeshift Mannequin, the 2-drop kind of new Blood Artist that the 1/2 that then also fabricates. So it's a way to kind of kill your opponent at instant speed by just sacrificing your board. So that's kind of another way there. Again, there's a lot of ways to kind of configure this. You're kind of a toolbox deck. The core of the deck is Yawgmoth, Knight Errant, Ropeline, the Young Wolf package. It's what you want to put in the rest of it. You have the Sorin as well, where you can gain a lot of life, flip it, and then shoot your. So if you just have a way to gain infinite life, or just gain a ton of life, you can then also just Sorin and kind of kill them that way there. The sideboard, you have a lot of different options here. Haywire Might, Fatal Push, Juggernaut Peddler for like hand hate, activated ability, Graveyard Hate, Sun Cleanser, Eldrami's Call as a way to get some card advantage. We've seen Elven Chorus in the past, so now you can tutor with this with the Court of Calling, Guardian of Faith for protection against sweepers, Ruthless Lawbringer as a removal effect that you could kind of, again, all these are creatures that you can tutor into. If you want it, Night Clubber is a card that can deal -1/1 to all your opponent's creatures, so it's another way to deal with like the energy go wide boards. Plague Mirror is another one, so there's a couple different tutorable cards that you can fetch with the deck. So then we go to Naya Prayers. So I think some element of this deck can be a good choice. It is a combo deck, and there's a few ways to build it, but again, leveraging the energy package. What I'm uncertain of, I haven't played enough games with this, is does it just auto lose to Sun Cleanser? Well, you can't execute the Prayers combo into Sun Cleanser, but I think there may be ways to build the deck to get around that just by having removal for the said Sun Cleanser. So Rending Volley is an option, stuff like that. How this deck works. So Primal Prayers lets you substitute the casting cost by paying 1 energy, and you can cast creatures at flash speed. With Guide of Souls out, you're able to just repeatedly cast the Guardian Evangel, and then you get a copy to your hand. You get an energy from Guide of Souls. So it's basically infinite creatures. You can tap down your opponent's board, all their mana at their end step, and then just attack in for lethal. The rest of the deck is just about finding combo pieces. Recruiter of the Guard can help you dig for combo pieces. Abundant Harvest helps you dig. Attune with Aether gets you lands and then energy. The Amp Raptor helps you dig into it. Malevolent Rumble helps you dig into it. Jarsoul helps you kind of recast your cards to dig into it, kind of mixed into there. The Shifting Woodlands is another card that can be brought in against heavy removal decks with the Prayers, because then this becomes a copy of the Prayers. Logic for heavy removal decks. Then you just have kind of different ways to kind of tutor. If you need to go at instant speed, if there's something like a Teferi out for whatever reason, you have the Immodane's Recruiter. I think largely the sideboard can become better. Like certain cards like Fire Foes isn't really a card that deals X damage to target creature and 1 damage to each other creature with the same name. So I guess this is like a way to kind of sweep up their board, but you could just play End the Festivities type thing. I think the sideboard can be improved on this, but this is the general kind of consensus of like a strategy for the main board. There's also this other version. I ran into this in Best of 1, and I found it fairly effective. So this one is an Abzan version of the deck. And what it's doing is playing more of a control-ish shell. So you still have your Guide of Souls, you still have your Guardian, you still have your Recruiter of the Guard. But this has got a Skyclave Apparition, it's got Ranger, Captain of Eos, which can help you tutor for your Guide of Souls, and then also just be used as like preventing removal from happening. So you can, sack it, your opponent can't cast non-creature spells, kind of go from there. This version is more focused on the combo, less about the creature package. So it's actually playing Divine Purge main. When you think about it, well, why are we playing Divine Purge in our creature deck? But you really only have to play your 2 combo pieces once you're already on board. You don't need to necessarily proactively play out the Guide of Souls. You can have it just for the combo turn, since you only need the 2 creatures to get going. Assemble the Team helps you dig for combo pieces, Malevolent, and then Inquisition for some hand hate. So it's an interesting kind of way to look at the deck where you're playing more of a longer game with it and then focused more on the combo. Fragment Reality is more removal. Oscillates if you want to play more of a fair mid-range game plan. Orange Chant can be used to basically time walk your opponent so they can't cast spells this turn, and then you can also force them to not be able to attack with creatures. Thoughtseize for removal, Sun Cleanser, and then Calling Ritual as a sweeper. So you're able to kind of play bigger, like play an Abzan control deck. That incidentally then also has some utility there, which is kind of cool when you look at it. I like this idea. This is something that I'll probably end up exploring as well to see how it plays out. So we have Mono Green Devotion. Newest cards added, Fanatic of Ronus, very powerful ramp enabler. If you have Ferocious, so creature power 4 or more, you're able to generate 4 mana. So this is huge mana acceleration. The Outcaster Trailblazer double functions with Kiora to generate a whole bunch of mana. Then you have your Karn board, kind of go to town with stuff like that. With the Karn board, a whole bunch of different options. I'm going to highlight one in particular that's a very good metagame call. Contagion Engine was part of the special sheet number 700 of that set. But when it enters the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature target player controls, and for 4 mana you could proliferate. Well, this is usually close to one-sided board wipe against the energy deck, so a good inclusion there. You also have the ability, when you kind of pop off, if you're able to generate huge amounts of mana, generate a huge board state, you can go Chroma's Memorial to give all your creatures haste and win the game that turn. So Mono Green Devotion if you're interested in it. I like this deck. I think it might have fallen off a bit, just given the density of all the other kind of energy decks. But having played the energy deck, I always found this matchup slightly problematic. It is the Sorin. So you have your Sorin Vainripper Vampires package, then you have your Bombardment package. And then how Bombardment works with Forsaken Miner is every instance of the Goblin Bombardment, if you have a black mana, you can bring the Forsaken Miner back to your hand, or sorry, back to the graveyard for each black mana, so you can just machine gun down your opponent. Citrus Pliers kind of fuel your graveyard, Voldaren Epicures, so you got a lot of incidental ways. Sorin can obviously combo into the Ripper, but then also just like, throw Blood Gas at your opponent, stuff like that. Seasoned Pyromancer refills your hand. You have a land that's also just Graveyard Exile in Boggart Trawler. And then Trolls also kind of play into effect. So you can also Troll Persist on turn 2, which is another kind of nice line. Self-mill yourself, Vainripper, Persist the Vainripper into play. Sideboard's pretty clean. Removal, combo, Graveyard Hate, Thoughtseize for the more controlling matchups. Bitter Triumph is catch-all removal. And then Brotherhood's End for the go-wide decks. You don't really care about your stuff dying, because oftentimes you can either sack Bombardment or get other utility. Brotherhood's End is actually pretty good against the Boros deck. Not only does it kill pretty much all their creatures, unless they have a Guide of Souls popping off, but it also hits the Ajani when it flips, which is big. So this is a version of the Azorius Control that you might see. This one's from Scamfield. They went 31-15. This is a Strict Proctor Lotus Field version of the deck. So leveraging Proctor, you got full Phlage and Null Drifter. So notably with Phlage, you can set it up where you don't pay the Strict Proctor trigger, so it doesn't have to get sacrificed. Depending on the amount of mana you have, you might not get the Lightning Helix that turn, but 3 mana, just get it into play, and then you go to town. Null Drifter, you can cast it for its evoke cost with the Strict Proctor out, and then you don't have to sacrifice it. Its draw card ability is a cast trigger, not an ATB, so you get that value. So Strict Proctor, Consigned to Memory are all ways that you get to shut off the Lotus Field sacrifice trigger. So you get to cheat out Lotus Field. I will say, depending on with this, so this is counter trigger ability or colorless spell. There's not really too many colorless spells going around. You're probably better off just playing Stifle, because that would also do activated abilities. So things like an Ajani activation, anything like that is maybe something you want to look at in that respect. This sees more play in Modern because Tron is a deck, and there's a lot more like Urza Saga kind of decks. But Wrath of Skies is kind of the main reason you kind of go with this. Just a very powerful sweeper mixed into the deck. Covers you against, hits the Bombardment, hits incidental artifacts like Amulet and stuff like that as well. Teferi's full set, Discontinuity, so you can generate a whole bunch of mana and then just time walk your opponent kind of mixed into there. Your sideboard's just got a bunch of different removal options, counters, purges, just incidental ways to kind of hit out your opponent. The art on this card always goes so hard. I love this art on this Ashiok. So we had a tournament for Historic. This was from the MTG Eternal Discord, and we advertised it earlier. Some of the folks are on my Discord that run that tournament as well. So it was won by Omri Thopter. They put up a video on this, and it's another version of the kind of energy deck, but a very interesting. So it's a bombardment kind of sacrifice deck that has incidental energy. And I apologize for this layout, but we'll kind of just go over it. So it's basically a red-black deck that then also has some white for a Johnny, basically, and Rite of Oblivion. But you have Bombardment, Deadly Dispute, Chthonian Nightmare that can rebuy stuff, Village Rites for card advantage, some claims in there to steal your opponent's stuff. Trap Finder helps you find other creatures. Unlucky Witness gets you creatures. Shambling Gas can kill your opponent's stuff, but also get you value. And then you have the Marionette Apprentice. This is the one I meant for the Yawgmoth deck. Gives you more bodies, and then it's kind of the Blood Artist effect. So you can kind of just keep looping creatures around, get that value. Rebuy, just repeatedly get back a Johnny, or through like the Nightmares, or like find it with Trap Finder. You kind of just keep getting consistent value out of that. So no Ocelots, nothing like that. It's a Lurrus Companion, Juggernaut Peddlers, Hand Hate, Croxa for the grindier matchups, Hand Hate with Thoughtseize, some removal options, just different ways to kind of attack the meta. So Omni got that. They have a video up on their YouTube. We see another copy of like the Jeskai Lotus deck. So pretty similar reprieves in here, Divine Purges. This one's a little heavier on like the Doorkeeper Thrall, Strict Proctor, ETB style Hand Hate with the Null Drifters as well. So there's another variant there. Rest in Pieces kind of mixed into there. Notably, Rest in Peace does shut off your Phlage. So this version here, you're kind of hoping for the Proctor to prevent it from going to the ground. There's different types of Yogg that come in. So we're seeing like the Marionette Apprentice, like I mentioned, kind of included there. This one's heavier on Guide of Souls in the package, but similar kind of concepts. So this is the energy version. This one's also got some Johnnies in there, but notably no red sources. So just as a token enabler in this particular version with a bunch of ways to make cats. And then like Convoke Yogg, like we mentioned, with Sun Cleanser main, full Marionette Apprentice. There's a lot of different ways you could configure. We see like the Nightclubber, like I mentioned in here. So you take a look at the list. There's a bunch of different decks here. We have a Snapcaster version with invert polarities, kind of more tempo oriented with One Ring. And then you also have like Dream Trawler in here. So a lot of different decks in this list. So I'm just going to cover 2 decks. These are best of 1 decks, but things you want to be on the radar for because you might see this in best of 3. So this is the Persist Combo. So there's a couple different variants of this going around. Some have Psychic Frog that you can discard the effects, some don't. But the core of the deck, you could technically win the game on turn 2. But what you do is looting or otherworldly gaze away, breach the multiverse or Emergent Ultimatum. And then you cast Scholar of the Lost Trove thanks to Persist. So you just reanimate. So you got to put a Scholar and one of the big spells into the graveyard. What you're basically doing is just repeatedly scholaring the Lost Troves with Breach the Multiverses, trying to target that each time. Or like Emergent Ultimatum, you can Conspiracy Unraveler to cast cards from your hand. Generate a big board. You have Glasspool Mimics that could come in as a copy of Scholar. So you generate a whole bunch of value like that. And then you're able to take an extra turn with Alrund's Epiphany and then just attack your opponent that way there. So it's an all-in graveyard deck, very focused on the graveyard. So this is a deck that a few people have posted results in the best of 1, and it's been seeing an increased popularity in terms of the deck. So just something to be mindful of. Doesn't have a sideboard yet. You can take a look, different ways, basically just ways to kind of blow up graveyard hate. You might want sweepers or stuff like that. But that's kind of something just to be on the lookout for. So there's also, I had more than one person 6-0 with this in best of 1. So this is the Woodlands Combo deck we posted on my YouTube a couple days ago. This was going to be my call for best of 1 if I played. It has a good Boros matchup, game 1 at least. How this deck works is you self-mill, you mill away an Omniscience. Shifting Woodlands becomes a copy of Omniscience. Then you have a bunch of ways to find Fae of Wishes, whether it be Assemble the Team, Archdruid's Charm, Traverse the Uvenwald. Fae of Wishes, then you basically do the Show and Tell combo. Fae of Wishes for Mastermind's Acquisition, Mastermind's Acquisition for the other Mastermind's Acquisition, a Mastermind's Acquisition for Scholar of the Ages. Scholar of the Ages, get these 2 back to your hand. You Masterminds for the Approach of Second Sun, cast Approach of Second Sun, Masterminds for the Approach of Second Sun in your library, cast Approach of Second Sun, win the game. These 2 cards are not needed for the combo. Final Parting is more of a backup plan, but you can get rid of that. So you basically have 11 slots if you do want to build sideboard. So I'm going to try this out to see if I can get it to work in best of 3. My thought is either go like a Planeswalker package. I don't think I want to go in anti-graveyard hate because Surgical Extraction is something that could see play, which you can't really metagame for. And I do want kind of a non-graveyard focus. If they're focusing on the graveyard, I can bring like, I'm thinking like 4-mana Vraska, which can be a threat, but also deal with graveyard hate, Liliana the Veil, Ends Control, Toxic Deluge, stuff like that, kind of mixed in to the deck. I was also thinking like Sorin Vein Ripper as an alternative package here, and then just disregard the graveyard in that case. You can take out the phase, you can take out the Omniscience, and kind of go from there. Take out the Assemble the Team, or even keep the Assemble the Teams. They're just going to value. Take out the Seed of Hopes kind of mixed into there, and then just shift into the other package, which can be strong. And then Shifting Woodlands can become Vein Ripper if you need it, which is always cool. So it's kind of another deck to just be on the radar for. So that's it for the breakdown. Let me know what you think, what you've been playing, and we'll catch you next time. Watching.